Hello my loves, this is Ro. Welcome back to my channel. Today we're doing a requested video on the difference between state and federal prison. This was a requested topic by 2 or 3 people who do not live in the United States. They have loved ones who are incarcerated in the United States and they're just interested. I got a comment from somebody recently who said I was a little bit insulting because people have been doing this for so long that I tend to, they thought, dumb things down and don't insult people who have been fighting for their loved ones for so long. And I just want to respond to that. If you know the difference between state and fed, you don't have to watch this video. If you've been fighting for so long and I say something like DA means district attorney, look past it. I am not trying to insult or speak down to anybody, but I do have a lot of people who are starting to follow me that have no involvement in the criminal justice system. They are here to learn. So I challenge you to not be a know-it-all. I challenge you to swallow those feelings, although I completely understand what you're saying. I took a business class one time, and the very first thing the teacher said was, what can you get from this? Even if you feel like you've learned this before and you know it already, how am I saying something differently? What new can you learn from it? What entertainment can you get from me in this video? So please do me a favor and swallow the pride, cut yourself a piece of humble pie, and if you're still with me, here we go. Let's do this. I have a little chart that I'm going to put up behind me, and this is literally the difference between state and fed, and then we will talk through it. So the first difference between state and federal on my little chart is federal prison is managed by the United States government, while state prisons are managed by the Department of Corrections of each individual state. Federal prison usually holds a lot of non-violent offenders, such as white-collar criminals, politicians who got trapped up in corruption, lower-level drug offenders, money launderers, and people who were involved in fraud. Not to say that there aren't other violent offenders and people who committed more violent crimes. There's crossover now, but often you see less violent offenders, white-collar people, internet cyber crimes in federal prison. State prison usually holds more violent offenders, such as people who commit SO crimes. If you don't know what that is, we'll post it in the comments below. I just don't want YouTube to have a reason to not publish this video. They're kind of strict with their guidelines, as they should be. I don't want to repeat the violent offenses, but you guys know. I don't have to explain it to you. And again, there is crossover, but that was in the chart, so I wanted to share and pass it along. This also says that federal facilities are usually a little bit more adequate, while state facilities are a lot less adequate. There's a lot more of rundown, dirty, filthy stuff. In the feds, the prisons are pretty bad, but it's known that state prisons are genuinely a lot worse. Adam has done time in both New Jersey state as well as federal prison, and he says that he can attest to that. Although one thing that he does say that bothers him a lot is when people say club fed. So club fed was a phrase that was created back when politicians started to get a whole bunch of corruption cases and they actually started to go to jail. This was probably back in, like 25 years ago. They started to get sent off to prison for the first time for this type of corruption. And a lot of their prisons back then were cushy. They were made to house these people with a lot of clout, these people who were beloved by society and got caught doing something wrong. Since then, hey, they were looked at as offenders just like everybody else, where I think that they should be. And club fed is a thing of the past. There is no such thing anymore. He says doing time is hard regardless. Prison is bad, period. It's not a place you want to live. It is germy, it is filthy, it is disgusting. There is corruption, and that is across the board, state and federal, although in his experience and in the experience of people who I've worked with throughout the past 10 years, I've been coaching prison wives and family members, state prisons are a bit worse. That is not diminishing what people in federal prison go through, because it is bad, but state facilities tend to run a little bit more rough and rugged. The short answer in the difference between state and federal prison is what you guys already know. If you go to federal prison, it is because you broke a federal law, and if you go to state prison, it is because you break a state law. So let's dive into that a little bit deeper. Here's the real difference. Federal Congress wants to pass federal laws if they have a real genuine interest in that activity. Let's use taking somebody's life as the example. Federal Congress can't come in and just say that taking somebody's life is a federal offense. But what they can come in and say is taking the life of a federal official or a federal officer is a federal offense because they have direct interest in that. It affects them directly. They can't pass a law that says robbery is a federal offense, but what they can do is come in, and what they've done is come in and say robbing a bank is a federal offense because it is backed by the FDIC. Therefore, bank robbery costs the federal government and taxpayers money when we have to go through insurance to recover those damages. Here's another interesting thing. Let's say you are convicted of a crime that violates both state and federal law. So let's say you're convicted of a bank robbery that's insured by the FDIC. You can be charged in the state under those states' robbery laws, and then you can also be charged under federal law. You could be charged federally, and those could stick in both state and federal courts. So a lot of you guys have your loved one who's doing either state or fed time. That's over, and then they have to flip-flop. So if they're in feds, they might have to go in state, or if they're in state, they might have to go feds and finish out their time. That's very, very, very common. And even though it's a single offense, it's one crime, it doesn't count as double jeopardy because you're committing crimes on a state level and on a federal level, so those both stick. So let's pick an example. Let's say you live in a state where felon in possession of a firearm is a state offense. Well, we also know that it is a federal offense. Robbing a bank is a federal offense if it was insured by the FDIC. Then he carried the money over state lines. That is a federal offense. Also, let's say the gun that he possessed, which is illegal in this state that he possessed the gun, so he could be charged federally and state for the gun, but most guns are crossing over state lines. You'd be hard pressed to find one that hadn't. So technically, he could be charged for that gun as well, not just felon in possession. He could be charged for the gun itself, state and federal. Do all of these charges usually wind up being charged separate? Not typically, but technically it can happen. And just like I was talking in the plea agreement deal, the government and the state usually comes in and they dangle this and they go, look at everything we can charge you with. You probably want to take this plea, and we'll knock all of this time off. It happens. Also, I don't know if you guys know this, but cyber crimes and white collar crimes are federal offenses across the board. Cyber crimes, because if you think about it, cyber is going to cross state lines. They're international crimes because when it's online, it could be received by, it could hit anywhere in the world. So how else do they differ? Number one, federal sentences tend to be a lot longer than state sentences. A lot, if not most, federal charges come along with a mandatory minimum sentence. So those automatically make federal time a lot longer. So it just depends. If you're talking the differences between state and federal, state is harder time. Automatically, there's going to be a lot more violence. There will be a lot more hiccups. It's just tougher time. But federal time is going to be a lot longer. So it's just, I guess, not that you get to choose your battle, but it's just a battle between, I don't know, I guess that's individual. What's better or worse there? Do you want a lot more violent, corrupt time and you get out in a fraction of the time? Or would you rather do your time in a tough place, but a lot less dramatic and over the top violent, but a lot longer. It reminds me of this story where Adam was entertaining some visitors that came in for a tour of the facility where he was at. They were there for some sort of seminar or presentation or something like that. Towards the end of this presentation, everybody kind of broke out into groups and they were talking, and Adam was talking to a very high up US attorney or the director of a department, one of the districts, one of the circuits, somebody very high up. And so the man, that person he was talking to, asked him, how long have you done? They were talking about Adam's time and trying to figure out a way to get him out because it's been a really long time for him. And so when he told him, well, I've done, at that point, it was 18 years. And the guy looks at him and he goes, I guess you could do some more. And that, unfortunately, is how people that are sentencing our loved ones and writing these laws think, because to them it is a number on a piece of paper. They really can't break it down and fathom what has happened over the last 18 years and how long that actually is. If you think about it, if you had a newborn baby, 18 years later, they are going off to college. They are a full-fledged adult. There was no Google. There was no Facebook. There was no YouTube. There wasn't any of this type of technology almost 20 years ago. Cell phones were just hitting the scene where people actually had them, and it wasn't just doctors or very high up professionals that needed them. We all had those Nextels or whatever they were called, those Motorola flip phones. I think I might even be going advanced a couple of years. I know when Adam went in, he had those Nextel walkie-talkies. Things were very, very, very different. Taking somebody away from their life for over 20 years or even 18 years and saying, that is disturbing, that is nauseating, and it's just really sad that that is the mentality in federal prison. So here's number 3. State prisons, like we said, tend to have a lot more violent offenders. Although there's violence in both and there are violent offenders in both, there is a higher percentage of violent offenders in state prison. That said, a lawyer told me this, 80% of people in federal prison are considered violent. I'm not saying that there aren't violent offenders in federal prison, but what I'm saying is, according to this, there is a higher percentage. So maybe it's 90 or 95% versus 80% of violent offenders in state prison. Things tend to run a lot more violent inside. Prison politics are a lot more serious. Although there is prison politics in the feds and there's a lot of segregation, they take their prison politics very, very seriously in the state, especially when you start to get to West Coast states. West Coast state prisons are the worst of the worst of the worst. Arizona, California, it's a very different type of time. Even Texas, it's a very different type of time. Now, if you're not in one of those states, you're like, hey, what about me? Prison is violent, period. Florida prisons are awful. But what I'm saying is, typically, those places are way worse. Even federal prisons on the West Coast just run very, very, very differently. They're very run by segregated groups, which every place is, but it's very serious there. There's a lot more hostility. You'll probably see a lot more people who are being run off yards and being victims of violent acts in states versus federal prison. Again, it's everywhere. Again, things are kind of blurred as lines are starting to cross. People are finishing their federal sentences, they're going into state. People are finishing state, they're going into fed. So there's a lot of blur, there's a lot of crossover, there's a lot of old school beliefs that are going to both. So it's starting to infiltrate and both are becoming very similar. Not in a good way, but just know that state time is a lot more violent usually than fed time. A lot more violent. So if it's like 80% again federal violence, it might be 90%. If it's run prison politics, 90% in the feds, it's probably 99% in the state. I want to be very clear that I am not saying anybody's time is easy, because it's not. I'm not saying that any prison is cushy, because they're not whatsoever. Club fed needs to be a thing of the past. It needs to stop being said because it's not true. But I just want you to know the difference between the two because you asked. Number 4, federal prisoners can be sent anywhere in the country, while state prisoners can be sent anywhere, but only within the confines of their home state. Now, sometimes that can be changed if there's way overcrowding. When I first started Strong Prison Wives, there were a lot of California prisoners who were being moved to Arizona just because of crazy overcrowding. You can try for interstate compacts where a prisoner or their family member can petition to one state to take an inmate from another state. So that's something that happens as well. But typically, state prisoners stay in state prison. Federal prisoners can be moved anywhere across the country. Within the First Step Act, it has been said, it was written, that federal prisoners should remain within 500 miles of their release address if they are not being transferred for disciplinary infractions. Is that the case always? No. Has that been implemented across the board? Not yet. I'm hearing that things are starting to change, that things are starting to be implemented. I am also hearing people call it the fake Step Act because it was passed in December. Here we are, end of August, and it's a lot of been crickets. So hopefully optimistic, but I don't know. So it's perceived that federal prisons run a little bit better, and they say that's because of federal dollars funding federal prisons, which is obviously huge. That's the federal government versus state grants or state tax dollars funding state prisons. So according to this, the food, the education programs, the programming period, the facilities and education across the board, and recreation and the recreation equipment and exercise equipment tends to run a little bit better in federal prison versus state prison that just doesn't have as much money behind it than federal prisons do. State prisons, because they're run off of state tax dollars, are perceived typically to be mismanaged. Those dollars are perceived to be mismanaged and underfunded. There are a few similarities between prisons. I mean, everything that I said is basically similar, just with little minor differences, but educational programs for inmates run in both state and federal prisons. Vocational programs for inmates that could help them develop skills on the outside tend to run for state and federal. Ways that they can better their education and earn money tend to run better. Something that happens in state that does not happen in federal, and it's different state to state, but federal does not get things like furlough. They don't get things like conjugal visits, nothing across the board. So the takeaway from that is every state runs their prison system differently. They run under their own state laws. So there are 50 separate state prison rules and regulations based on the laws within those states. Federal prisons run under one blanket federal set of guidelines inside of prisons. So for example, there is zero conjugal visits, heart is broken, inside of federal prison for any federal inmate. If you guys like this video, if you appreciate that I took the time to do all of this research for you guys, give me a thumbs up. And before we continue, I'm going to tell you all the stats in state and federal prisons, but really quick, do you guys love my earrings? I totally forgot to do this in the beginning of this video. So my friend Megan makes these earrings, and I cannot do this video without giving her a shout out. These are cuffs and they say freedom. How amazing are these earrings? I saw these on her website and I was like, girl, I need those too. I'm gonna buy those from you. So she is from Serenity Belle Designs, Serenity, B-E-L-L-E Designs. She has a Facebook page under that name. That is not me trying to sell anything for anybody, anything like that. I am just telling you that I love them. You guys always ask me where I get stuff like this. And so I'm beating you to the punch. If you want to go follow her, please go follow her over there. I cannot wait to wear these to a visit. Are they not perfect for a prison wife? Plus they're like fancy. I'm obsessed with them. I'm seriously obsessed with them. I'm going to wear these all the time. Obsessed. Okay. More than 2.3 1.3 million people are incarcerated in the United States as of 2018. The United States has the highest incarceration rate in the world, with 716 people incarcerated for every 100,000 residents as of, again, in 2018. There are 1,719 state prisons in the United States. The BOP, which is the Federal Bureau of Prisons, operates 102 prisons. There are 3,163 local jails that serve America's short-term prison population. 20% of incarcerated Americans are serving sentences for drug-related crimes. This one's hard. As of 2017, 4,500, so that's 4,500 juveniles, minors, are serving time in adult facilities. In total, 34,000 juveniles are in juvenile detention facilities, with another 20,000 living in residential facilities operated by juvenile justice systems. At both the state and the federal facility, there are also different levels. So I know in the feds, it goes supermax, max, which is the United States penitentiaries, medium, which is your FCIs, federal correctional institutions, and then you have a low, and then you have a camp. And some mediums run medium high. There are dropout yards, FCIs and below. So there's different levels, but those are basically all of them. And then I know in the state systems, I don't know much about it, but I know it's level 1 through 6, and you have to either work your way up or down. I am not sure. I don't have experience there, but I believe that those might be at different, yes, they're in different facilities altogether, but they also might run different floors at the same building, on the same facility. So if you're level 6, let's say, you move up to a different floor. Where Adam is in the feds, you move to a completely separate facility, a completely different building. Sometimes they're run on complexes. So where Adam is right now, they have a medium security level and they have a camp. They skip the low. There's no low there, but they have a camp. Where he was before, they had a high, they had a medium, and they have a low. I believe at Coleman, which is a huge complex, correct me if I'm wrong in the comments below, I don't know for certain, but I'm pretty sure that one houses one of the most amount of inmates in our country. That was really, really hard to say. That one houses the most amount of inmates in our country. There we go. If I say it faster, it'll work. I believe that they have a high, medium, a low, and maybe a camp. You guys correct me down there, but I know that different complexes have different levels. And there are separate facilities for men and women. I am not aware of any facilities that house both men and women in the feds. I believe they are all 100% separate institutions. However, in some county jails, I believe the men are on one side, the women are on the other side. I'm not sure if in the states, you guys can let me know, but usually they don't interact too much. They might see each other, but they can't get to each other, if that makes sense. So I think we'll cut it off there. Those are the main differences that I am aware of between state and federal prison. Again, I did my homework, but for you guys that have experience in either or if you have experience in both, let us know in the comments below what you think, what your experience is, and the differences between the two from your point of view. Also, if you're cool with and like these types of educational videos, either if you have a loved one in there or you don't, or you're not from the United States and you want some clarifying videos, let me know. If you would like more like this, I'd be happy to oblige. Whatever questions you have, whatever requests you have for future videos, I got you, my friends. Just comment below. Check out Serenity Belle Designs for earrings if you'd like to. Tell her that Ro sent you. I love you guys. Keep staying strong. Keep loving strong. Keep supporting one another through this journey, because you're one day closer to it all being behind you. And Lord knows, so am I. I think I'm going to start adding that into the outro every single time and putting it out there. I love you guys with all of my heart. I will see you beautiful ladies and gentlemen on the next one. Bye.